Jehu boldly tested their loyalty by saying, "If you belong to me, take the heads of the men that are sons of your Lord, and come to me tomorrow at this time at Jezreel." The next day messengers appeared, carrying in baskets the 70 heads, which Jehu commanded to be put in 2 heaps at the gate of Jezreel until morning. After this Jehu killed all of Ahab's distinguished men, his acquaintances, and his priests. Then he slaughtered 42 other men, the brothers of Ahab's grandson King Ahijah of Judah. Thus he destroyed also the sons of Jehoram of Judah, the husband o textoi acute miritra longo. Jehu 24 account in the Book of Kings. The record reads, "Thus Jehu annihilated Baal out of Israel." 2 Kai 10. 18-28 However, later on Baal worship again gave trouble in both Israel and Judah. 2 Kai 17. 16. 2 Ch 28. 2 Ch 32. 29. Likely to keep the 10-tribe kingdom of Israel distinct from the kingdom of Judah with its temple of Jehovah at Jerusalem, King Jehu let the calf worship remain in Israel with its centers at Dan and Bethel. And Jehu himself did not take care to walk in the law of Jehovah the God of Israel with all his heart. He did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam with which he caused Israel to sin. 2 Kai 10. 29, 31. Nevertheless, for Jehu's zealous and thorough work in eradicating Baalism and in executing Jehovah's judgments on the house of Ahab, Jehovah rewarded Jehu with the promise that 4 generations of his sons would sit upon the throne of Israel. It was fulfilled in Jehu's descendants Jehoahaz, Jehoash, Jeroboam II, and Zechariah, whose rule ended in his assassination in about 791 BCE. The dynasty of Jehu therefore reigned over Israel for about 114 years. 2 Kai 10. 30. 13. 1, 10. 14. 23. 15. 8-12. Why was the house of Jehu held accountable by God for bloodshed, when Jehovah had commissioned Jehu as his executioner? However, after Jehu's day, by the prophet Hosea, Jehovah said, "For yet a little while, and I must hold an accounting for the acts of bloodshed of Jezreel against the house of Jehu, and I must cause the royal rule of the house of Israel to cease." Ho 1. For this blood guilt on Jehu's house could not be for his carrying out the commission to destroy the house of Ahab, for God commended him for this. Neither could it be because he destroyed Ahijah of Judah and his brothers. By their family connections, namely, the marriage of Jehoram of Judah, the son of King Jehoshaphat, to Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, the royal line of Judah was contaminated with an infiltration of the wicked house of Omri. Rather, the key to the matter seems to lie in the statement that Jehu let calf worship continue in Israel and did not walk in the law of Jehovah with all his heart. Probably Jehu came to believe that independence from Judah could be maintained only through religious separation. Like other kings of Israel, he sought to secure his position by perpetuating calf worship. This was really an expression of lack of faith in Jehovah, who had made it possible for Jehu to become king. So, it may be that, apart from the proper execution of Jehovah's judgment against the house of Ahab, the wrong motivations that prompted Jehu to let calf worship remain also caused him to spill blood. The real power of the kingdom of Israel was broken when Jehu's house fell, the kingdom lasting only about 50 years longer. Only Menahem, who struck down Zechariah's murderer Shallum, had a son who succeeded him on the throne. This son, Pekahiah, was assassinated, as was his murderer and successor Pekah. Hoshea, Israel's last king, went into captivity to the king of Assyria. 2 Kai 15. 10, 13-30. 17. 4. The primary sin of Israel all along was its practice of calf worship. This led to the drawing of the nation away from Jehovah, with consequent deterioration. So the guilt for the bloodshed of Jezreel was one of the things, along with murdering, stealing, adultery, and other crimes, that really found its root in the false worship in which the rulers permitted the people to indulge. Finally God had to cause the royal rule of the house of Israel to cease. Ho 1. 4. 4. 2. Syria and Assyria harass Israel. Because of not turning fully to Jehovah and walking in his ways, Jehu had to face trouble from Hazael, the king of Syria, all the days of his o textoi acute miritra longo. Jacabziel 25 Mentators remark that this is the first pictorial portrayal of Israelites, as far as is known. However, we cannot be absolutely sure of the truthfulness of Shalmaneser's claim. Also, the appearance of the figure in the picture cannot be relied on to be an accurate likeness of an Israelite, for these nations may have depicted their enemies as undesirable in appearance, much as drawings or pictures today portray people of an enemy nation as weak, grotesque, or hateful. 4. The son of Og of the family of Jerahmeel, a descendant of Hezron, son of Perez, who was born to Judah by Tamar. This Jehu's line came through Jarah, an Egyptian slave. Shishon, a descendant of Jerahmeel, had no sons, so he gave to Jarah his daughter as wife. The son born to them was Athai, an ancestor of Jehu. 1 Ch 2. 3-5, 25, 34-38. 5. A Simeonite, the son of Joshebia. In the days of King Hezekiah of Judah he was among the chieftains of the Simeonite families who struck down the Hamites and the Munim living in the vicinity of Dor, and he dwelt thereafter in the place of these people with their flocks. 1 Ch 4. 24, 35, 38-41. Hubbar. A leading member of the tribe of Asher. 1 Ch 7. 34, 40. Jehovah is able. Jehovah prevails, Jukal shortened form of Chuckle. A prince sent by King Zedekiah to ask Jeremiah to pray for Judah. 37. 3 This son of Shelemiah and 3 other influential princes had Jeremiah put into the miry cistern because his preaching was, as they put it, weakening the hands of the men of war, as well as the hands of the people in general. 38. 1-6. Jihad. A site in the territory of Danjos 19. 40, 45 usually identified with Elihajihad, some 13 kilometers 8 mi of Tel Aviv Yafo. The Greek Septuagint Vatican Mizno. 1209, though, uses Azza instead of Chud. Jos 19. 45 Therefore some scholars link Chud with Atel near Yazazza, about 6 kilometers 3.5 mi of Tel Aviv Yafo. It is believed that this is the place called Azuru in Sennacherib's annals. Chudiji Middle. Of belonging to Judah. An officer of King Jehoiakim sent by the princes of Judah to bring to them Baruch with Jeremiah's scroll. When Chudi later read the same roll to Jehoiakim, the king cut it up and burned it, piece by piece, until the whole scroll was destroyed. 36. 14, 21-23, 27, 32. Chudi was a great-grandson of Cushi. 36. 14 His name and that of his ancestor are thought by some to denote that he was not a Jew by birth, but a proselyte, his great-grandfather's name suggesting that the family was from Cush, or Ethiopia. However, those of the generations in between both have typical Jewish names Nethaniah his father and Shelemiah his grandfather, and even the name Cushi itself is elsewhere found as a proper name of a natural-born Jew. Zep 1. So Chudi was most likely simply a proper name given at birth and not a name first acquired as a proselyte. JLG Middle.al. 1. The descendant of Jacob's son Reuben. 1 Ch 5. 1, 7. 2. A Benjamite who, together with his family wife Machah and 10 sons, was a settler of Gibeon. An ancestor of King Saul. 1 Ch 8. 29. 9. 35-39 apparently the same as Abiel. 1 So 9. 1. See Abiel number 1. 3. One of David's mighty men. Son of Hutham the Aroeret. 1 Ch 11. 26, 44. 4. A Levite, both a gatekeeper and a musician, who participated in the musical celebration when the ark was first brought to Jerusalem and thereafter played in front of the tent that contained it. 1 Ch 15. 17, 18, 21, 28. 16. 1, 4, 5 The second occurrence of the name in verses 5. 5. Another Levite musician who performed the same services as No. 4. 1 Ch 16. 5, The first occurrence of the name in that verse he is called Jaazeel at 1 Chronicles 15:18 and Aziel in 15:20. A Levitical descendant of Asaph and ancestor of the Levite who encouraged King Jehoshaphat and the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem not to otextoi acute muritra longo. Jechamim 26 Jechamim Jek middle. Made the people rise up. The fourth son of Hebron, a Kohathite Levite, and founder of a Levitical paternal house that survived at least until David's reign. 1 Ch 23. 12, 19. 24. 23, 30b, 31. Jekhamu Jek middle. Miaja has raised up. 1. A descendant of Judah and son of Shalom. 1 Ch 2. 3, 41. 2. One of the sons born to King Jehoiachin Jeconiah during his Babylonian exile. 1 Ch 3. 17, 18. Jekathiel G middle. Kuthai middle. L. A descendant of Judah and father of Zanoah. 1 Ch 4. 1, 18 Zanoah is the name of a city rather than a person in its other occurrence Jos 15. 56, 57, so Jekathiel as its father was likely the father of those who settled there, or was himself its founder or chief settler. Jemima G middle. Mima. The first of Job's 3 daughters born after his great test. Jemima and her sisters, the most beautiful women in all the land, received an inheritance in among their 7 brothers. Job 42. 13-15. Jemuel Gem middle. Ul possibly, day of God. The first named son of Simeon and one of the 70 numbered among Jacob's household who came into Egypt. Ge 46. 10, 27. X 6. 15 in other accounts he is called Nemuel. New 26. 12. 1 Ch 4. 24. Jephthah may God open. God has opened. A judge of Israel, of the tribe of Manasseh. New 26. 29. JG 11. One he administered justice over the territory of Gilead for 6 years perhaps during the priesthood of Eli and the early life of Samuel. JG 12. 7 Jephthah's reference to 300 years of Israelite control of the Jordan would seem to place the start of his 6-year judgeship around 1173 BCE JG 11. 26. Jephthah a legitimate son. The mother of Jephthah was a prostitute woman, not meaning, however, that Jephthah was born of prostitution or was illegitimate. His mother had been a prostitute prior to her marriage as a secondary wife to Gilead, just as Rahab had once been a prostitute, but later married Salmon. JG 11. 1. Jos 2. 1. Mount 1. 5 That Jephthah was not illegitimate is proved by the fact that his half-brothers by Gilead's primary wife drove him out so that he would not share in the inheritance. JG 11. 2 Additionally, Jephthah later became the accepted leader of the men of Gilead of whom Jephthah's half-brothers seemed to be foremost. JG 11. 11 Moreover, he offered a sacrifice to God at the tabernacle. JG 11. 30, 31 None of these things would have been possible for an illegitimate son, for the law specifically stated, no illegitimate son may come into the congregation of Jehovah. Even to the 10th generation none of his may come into the congregation of Jehovah. De 23. 2. Jephthah was evidently the firstborn of Gilead. Consequently he would normally have inherited 2 portions in the property of his father Gilead, who apparently was dead at the time Jephthah's half-brothers drove him out and would also have been the head of the family. Only by illegally driving him away could Jephthah's half-brothers deprive him of his rightful inheritance, for even though the firstborn son of a father was the son of a secondary wife, or even a less favored wife, he was, nevertheless, to receive the firstborn's rights. De 21. 15-17. Idle men gathered to Jephthah. When Jephthah was driven away by his half-brothers he took up dwelling in the land of Tob, a region of Gilead, apparently outside the borders of Israel. Here Jephthah would be on the frontier, exposed to Israel's foreign enemies, particularly Ammon. Idle men, that is, men evidently made idle or put out of employment by Ammonite harassment, and revolting against servitude to Ammon, came to Jephthah and put themselves under his command. JG 11. 3. The people living in the territory of the Jordan River, the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh, were mainly cattle raisers, and the forays of the Ammonite raiders who even crossed the Jordan at times had apparently taken away the possessions and the means of livelihood. O text to acute miritra longo. Jephthah 27. They saw the need for proper leadership and direction. JG 10. 18. They realized that they must be under the headship of a God-appointed man if they were to defeat Ammon. JG 11. 5, 6, 10. Undoubtedly Jephthah and his men had been performing exploits in Tob, suggesting that he was God's designated choice. JG 11. 1. The men of Gilead decided to go to Jephthah, whom they had despised, to ask him to be their head. Jephthah becomes head of Gilead. Jephthah agreed to lead them in the fight against Ammon on one condition. If Jehovah gave him victory, he would continue as head after returning from the fight. His insistence on it was not a selfish demand. He had shown himself concerned with the fight in behalf of God's name and his people. Now, if he defeated Ammon, it would prove that God was with him. Jephthah wanted to make sure that God's rule would not be forsaken again once the crisis had passed. Also, if he was indeed Gilead's firstborn son, he was only establishing his legal right as head of the house of Gilead. The covenant was then concluded before Jehovah in Mizpah. Here again Jephthah showed that he looked to Jehovah as Israel's God and King, and their real deliverer. JG 11. 8-11. Jephthah, a man of action, lost no time in exercising vigorous leadership. He sent a message to the king of Ammon, pointing out that Ammon was the aggressor in invading Israel's land. The king replied that it was land Israel had taken from Ammon. JG 11. 12, 13. Here Jephthah showed himself to be not a mere rough, uncultured warrior, but a student of history and particularly of God's dealings with his people. He refuted the Ammonite argument, showing that one Israel did not molest Ammon, Moab, or Edom. JG 11. 14-18. The 2. 9, 19, 37. 2ch 20. 10, 11. 2. Ammon had not possessed the disputed land at the time of the Israelite conquest, because it was in the hands of the Canaanite Amorites, and God had given their king, Sihon, and his land into Israel's hand. 3. Ammon had not disputed Israel's occupation for the past 300 years. Therefore, on what valid basis could they do so now? JG 11. 19-27. Jephthah got at the heart of the matter when he showed that the issue revolved around the matter of worship. He declared that Jehovah God had given Israel the land, and that for this reason they would not give an inch of it to worshippers of a false god. He called Chemosh the god of Ammon. Some have thought this to be an error. But, although Ammon had the god Milcom, and though Chemosh was a god of Moab, those related nations worshipped many gods. Solomon even wrongly brought the worship of Chemosh into Israel, because of his foreign wives. JG 11. 24. 1k 11. 1, 7, 8, 33. 2k 23. 13. Furthermore, Chemosh may mean subduer, conqueror, according to some scholars. See Gesenius's Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon, translated by S. Tregels, 1901, p. 401. Jephthah may have called attention to this god as being given credit by the Ammonites for subduing or conquering others and giving them land. Jephthah's vow. Jephthah now saw that a fight with Ammon was God's will. With God's spirit energizing him, he led his army to the fight. Similar to Jacob's action some 600 years previously, Jephthah made a vow, demonstrating his wholehearted desire for Jehovah's direction and attributing any success he would have to Jehovah. JG 11. 30, 31. GE 28. 20-22. Jehovah heard his vow with favor, and the Ammonites were subdued. JG 11. 32, 33. Did Jephthah have in mind human sacrifice when he vowed to present as a burnt offering the first one coming out of his house? Some critics and scholars have condemned Jephthah for his vow, having the view that Jephthah followed the practice of other nations. O text to acute miritra longo. Jephthah 28 mind that Jehovah's spirit was on Jephthah at the time. This would prevent any rash vow on Jephthah's part. How, then, would the person coming out to meet Jephthah to congratulate him on his victory become Jehovah's and be offered up as a burnt offering. JG 11. 31. Persons could be devoted to Jehovah's exclusive service in connection with the sanctuary. It was a right that parents could exercise. Samuel was one such person, promised a tabernacle service by vow of his mother Hannah before his birth. This vow was approved by her husband Elkanah. As soon as Samuel was weaned, Hannah offered him at the sanctuary. Along with him, Hannah brought an animal sacrifice. Once a 1. 11, 22-28. 2. 11 Samson was another child especially devoted to God's service as a Nazirit. JG 13. 2-5, 11-14. Compare the father's authority over a daughter as outlined in New 30. 3-5, 16. When Jephthah brought his daughter to the sanctuary, which was in Shiloh at that time, he undoubtedly accompanied his presentation of her with an animal burnt offering. According to the law, a burnt offering was slaughtered, skinned, and cut up. The intestines and shakes were washed, and its body, head and all, was burned on the altar. The 1. 3-9 The wholeness of such offering represented full, unqualified, wholehearted dedication to Jehovah, and when it accompanied another offering as, for example, when the burnt offering followed the sin offering on the Day of Atonement, it constituted an appeal to Jehovah to accept that other offering. The 16. 3, 5, 6, 11, 15, 24. It was a real sacrifice on the part of both Jephthah and his daughter, for he had no other child. JG 11. 34 Therefore no descendant of his would carry on his name and his inheritance in Israel. Jephthah's daughter was his only hope for this. She wept, not over her death, but over her virginity, for it was the desire of every Israelite man and woman to have children and to keep the family name and inheritance alive. JG 11. 37, 38 Barrenness was a calamity. But Jephthah's daughter never had relations with a man. Had these words applied only to the time prior to the carrying out of the vow, they would have been superfluous, for she is specifically said to have been a virgin. That the statement has reference to the fulfilling of the vow is shown in that it follows the expression, he carried out his vow that he had made toward her. Actually, the record is pointing out that also after the vow was carried out she maintained her virginity. JG 11. 39. Compare enderings in KJ. Die. Ig. NW. Moreover, Jephthah's daughter was visited from year to year by her companions to give her commendation. JG 11. 40 The Hebrew word Tana, used here, also occurs at Judges 5. 11, and in that text is variously rendered recount NW, rehearse KJ, recounted at, repeat RS. The word is defined in a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon edited by B. Davis, 1957, p. 693 as to repeat, to rehearse. At Judges 11. 40 The King James Version renders the term lament, but the margin reads talk with. As Jephthah's daughter served at the sanctuary, doubtless like other Nethinim given ones devoted to sanctuary service, there was much she could do. These persons served in gathering wood, drawing water, doing repair work, and undoubtedly performing many other tasks as assistants to the priests and Levites there. Jos 9. 21, 23, 27. Es 7. 24. 8. 20. Eni 3. 26. Ephraimites resist Jephthah? The Ephraimites, who considered themselves the dominant tribe of northern Israel including Gilead, proudly refused to acknowledge Jephthah and sought to justify themselves. So they worked up a false charge as an excuse for taking offense against him. A like attitude had been shown by them years before, in Judge Gideon's time. JG 8. 1 They claimed that Jephthah failed to call them to the fight against Ammon, and they threatened to burn Jephthah's house over him. JGO textoi acute miritra longo, Job 29 libera, and at Hebrews 11. 32 He is listed among the faithful cloud of witnesses. Job 12. 1. Jephaneji middle.funnow. 1. Father of the Judean spy Caleb and, likely, the father of Kenaz. New 13. 2, 3, 6. 1ch4. 15. JG1. 13 Jephunneh a Kenizzite associated with the tribe of Judah. Jos 14. 6, 14. 2. A prominent member of the tribe of Asher. 1ch7. 38, 40. Jerah lunar month. A son of Joktan whose descendants may have settled somewhere in Arabia. GE10. 26-29. 1ch1. 20. See Joktan. Dramil G middle dot Rami middle dot L may God show mercy. God has shown mercy. 1. The firstborn of Judah's grandson Hezron. The royal and messianic lineage passed through Dramil's brother Ram, apparently the same as Ani. An extensive genealogy is included for Dramil's descendants, some of whom inhabited the southern part of Judah. 1ch2. 4, 5, 9-15, 25-42. 1ch27. 10. Lu 3. 33. 2. Son or descendant of a Merarite Levite named Kish. 1ch24. 26, 29. 23. 21. 3. One of the 3 men sent by King Jehoiakim in his 5th year to seize Jeremiah and Baruch. They returned empty-handed, however, for Jehovah kept his faithful servants concealed. Jer 36. 9, 26. Since Jehoiakim's successor and presumed firstborn Jehoiachin was only about 12 years old during his father's 5th year of rule, other sons of Jehoiakim were likely still younger, too young to be sent on such a mission as Dramil's. 2 Kai 23. 36. 24. 6, 8 Therefore, Dramil's being called the son of the king might mean, not that he was an offspring of the king, but that he was a member of the royal household or an official of royal descent. Of interest is the discovery of a seal impression, said to be from the 7th century BCE that reads, belonging to Dramil the king's son. Israel Exploration Journal, Jerusalem, 1978, Volume 28, p. 53. Dramilites G middle dot Rami middle dot L middle dot ites of belonging to Dramil. The descendants of Judah through Dramil son of Hezron. 1ch2. 4, 9, 25-27, 33, 42 The Dramilites live in the southern part of Judah, apparently in the same general region as the Amalekites, Jeshurites, and Gerzites whom David raided while residing among the Philistines as a fugitive from King Saul. When returning from such raids, David would ambiguously report that these raids had been made upon the south of Judah and upon the south of the Dramilites and upon the south of the Kenites. Philistine King Achish, therefore, assumed that David had raided Israelites, thus making himself a stench to his countrymen and enhancing his value to Achish. 1ch27. 7-12 In reality, David later shared spoils of war with the older men in the cities of the Dramilites. 1ch30. 26, 29. Joboaheb. Akmiddle.bar. The Hebrew word akmiddle.bar, variously rendered mouse, rat, Joboah, and jumping rodent, is understood by many scholars as possibly embracing all varieties of rats, mice, and related animals such as the Joboah. However, the Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon by Kuhler and Baumgartner gives the meaning of the Hebrew term as Joboah. The Joboah is a jumping rodent that somewhat resembles a miniature kangaroo and is still encountered in the arid parts of the Middle East. The desert Joboah jaculus has a body length of from 10 to 15 centimeters 4-6 inches and weighs 50 to 70 grams 1.8-2. 5 Oz. Their ears and eyes are large. The Joboah resembles a miniature kangaroo. Jid 30 The front limbs are short, but the 2 hind limbs measure about 2/3 of the total head and body length. The tail is the longest part of the animal and terminates in a small brush. This nocturnal animal prefers desert lands, spending the hot day in its underground burrow, but venturing forth during the cooler night to procure food. Although the Arabs inhabiting the Syrian desert used the Joboah for food, it was legally unclean to the Israelites. Lur 11. 29. But it seems that apostate Israelites ignored this prohibition of the law. Issa 66. 17. FTN. Jerpa was a destructive to grain and other crops. During the time the sacred ark was in the territory of the Philistines, the divinely sent plague of Jerpa was brought the land to ruin. 1 6. 4, 5, 11, 18. Jedired, a descendant of Judah and father of Dor, or of those who settled the town of Dor. 1 Ch 4. 1, 18. Shroud Beth Joab. Jeremiah my shortened form of Jemath or of Jeremiah. Apostolic Israelite, one of the 7 sons or descendants of Hashum who had taken foreign wives but sent them away. As 10. 25, 33, 44. Jeremiah Jemiddle.E possibly, Jehovah exalts. Or, Jehovah loosens likely from the womb. 1. A Benjamite who joined David when he was at Ziklag. He was among David's mighty men. 1 Ch 12. 1-4. 2. One of the sons of Gad who gathered to David at the place difficult to approach in the wilderness when David was a refugee from Saul. He was the 5th among these valiant, mighty men, whose faces were the faces of lions, and they were like the gazelles upon the mountains for speed. Of these Gadite heads of David's army, it is said, the least one was equal to 100, and the greatest to 1,000. They crossed the Jordan in the first month when it was overflowing all its banks, and they then chased away all those of the lower plains, to the east and to the west. 1 Ch 12. 8-15. 3. The 10th one of the Gadite heads in David's army, as described in No. 2. 1 Ch 12. 13, 14. 4. One of the heads of paternal houses in the section of the tribe of Manasseh of the Jordan in the days of the kings. The Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh of the Jordan among them being this Jeremiah's descendants began to act unfaithfully toward the God of their forefathers, and went having immoral intercourse with the gods of the peoples of the land, whom God had annihilated from before them. Consequently the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul the king of Assyria, even the spirit of Tilgath-Pilneser the king of Assyria, so that in the days of Pekah, king of Israel, he took into exile those of the Reubenites, and of the Gadites, and of the half-tribe of Manasseh, and brought them to Hala and Hebron-Hara in the river Gozan. 1 Ch 5. 23-26. 2 Chi 15. 29. 5. A man of the town of Libnah, a priestly city. He was the father of King Josiah's wife Hamutal, who was the mother of kings Jehoahaz and Zedekiah. 2 Chi 23. 30, 31. 24. 18. Jah 52. 1. Jos 21. 13. 1 Ch 6. 57. 6. A prophet, the son of Hilkiah, a priest of Anathoth, a city of the priests located in Benjamin's territory less than 5 kilometers 3 mi in any of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Jah 1. 1. Jos 21. 13, 17, 18. Jeremiah's father, Hilkiah, was not the high priest of that name, who was of the line of Eleazar. Jeremiah's father was very likely of the line of Ithamar, and possibly descended from Abiathar, the priest whom King Solomon dismissed from priestly service. 1 Chi 2. 26, 27. Commissioned as prophet. Jeremiah was called to be a prophet when a young man, in 647 BCE in the 13th year of the reign of King Josiah of Judah 659-629 BCE. Jehovah told him, before I was forming you in the belly I knew you, and before you proceeded to come forth from the womb I sanctified you. Prophet to the nations I made you. Jah 1. 2-5. He was therefore one of the few men for whose birth Jehovah assumed responsibility. O textoi acute miritra longo. Jeremiah 31. Earthly ministry took him to be Jeremiah returned to life. Mount 16. 13, 14. Writings. Jeremiah was a researcher and a historian as well as a prophet. He wrote the book bearing his name and is also generally credited with writing the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, covering the history of both kingdoms Judah and Israel from the point where the books of Samuel left off, that is, in the latter part of David's reign over all Israel, down to the end of both kingdoms. His chronology of the period of the kings, using the method of comparison or collation of the reigns of Israel's and Judah's kings, helps us to establish the dates of certain events with accuracy. After the fall of Jerusalem, Jeremiah wrote the Book of Lamentations. Strong denunciatory message. Jeremiah was no chronic complainer. Rather, he showed himself to be loving, considerate, and sympathetic. He exercised fine control and marvelous endurance, and was moved to great sadness by the conduct of his people and the judgments they suffered. Shroud. 21. Actually, it was Jehovah who made the complaint against Judah, and justifiably so, and Jeremiah was under obligation to declare it unremittingly, which he did. Also, it must be borne in mind that Israel was God's nation, bound to him by covenant and under his law, which they were grossly violating. As basis and solid ground for Jeremiah's denunciations, Jehovah repeatedly pointed to the law, calling attention to the responsibility of the princes in the people and recounting wherein they had broken the law. Time and again Jehovah called attention to the things he, through his prophet Moses, had warned them would come upon them if they refused to listen to his words and broke his covenant. 26. 28. Courage, endurance, love. Jeremiah's courage and endurance were matched by his love for his people. He had scathing denunciations and fearful judgments to proclaim, especially to the priests, prophets, and rulers, and to those who took the popular course and had developed an enduring unfaithfulness. Shroud. 5, 6. Yet he appreciated that his commission was also to build and to plant. 1. 10. He wept over the calamity that was to come to Jerusalem. Shroud. 21, 22. 9. 1. The Book of Lamentations is in evidence of his love and concern for Jehovah's name and people. In spite of cowardly, vacillating King Zedekiah's treacherousness toward him, Jeremiah pleaded with him to obey the voice of Jehovah and continue living. 38. 4, 5, 19-23. Furthermore, Jeremiah had no self-righteous attitude, but included himself when acknowledging the wickedness of the nation. 14. 20, 21. After his release by Nebuzaradan, he hesitated to leave those being taken into Babylonian exile, perhaps feeling that he should share their lot or desiring to serve their spiritual interests further. 40. 5. At times in his long career Jeremiah became discouraged and required Jehovah's assurance, but even in adversity he did not forsake calling on Jehovah for help. 20. Associations. Through all of his more than 40 years of prophetic service, Jeremiah was not abandoned. Jehovah was with him to deliver him from his enemies. 1. 19. Jeremiah took delight in Jehovah's word. 15. 16. He avoided association with those who had no consideration for God. 15. 17. He found good associates among whom he could do building up work. 1. 10. Namely, the Rechabites, Ebmelech, and Baruch. Through these friends he was assisted and delivered from death, and more than once Jehovah's power was manifested in protecting him. 26. 7-24. 35. 1-19. 36. 19-26. 38. 7-13. 39. 11-14. 40. 1-5. Dramatic illustrations. Jeremiah performed several small dramas as symbols to Jerusalem of her condition and the calamity to come to her. There was his visit to the house of the potager. 18. 1-11, and the incident of the ruined belt. 13. 1-11. Jeremiah was commanded not to marry. This served o text to acute miritra longo. Jeremiah, Book of 32 Days of Jesus' Young Childhood. Mount 2. 17, 18. 31. 15. The Apostle Paul spoke of the prophets, among whom was Jeremiah, from whose writings he quoted, at Hebrews 8. 8-12. 31. 31-34. Of these men, the same writer said, the world was not worthy of them, and they had witness borne to them through their faith. Heb 11. 32, 38, 39. 7. Son of Habaziah and father of Yaazaniah, the latter being a leader of the Rechabites, whose integrity the prophet Jeremiah tested by offering them wine, which they refused. J 35. 1-10, 19. 8. A priest or one representing the priestly house of that name who returned from Babylonian exile in 537 BCE with governor Zerubbabel and high priest Jeshua. NE 12. 1. 9. A priest or one representing a household by that name among those attesting by seal the trustworthy arrangement entered into before Jehovah by Nehemiah and the princes, priests, and Levites, to walk in God's law. If the name stands for a house rather than an individual, this may be the same as no. 8. NE 9. 38. 10. 1, 2, 29. 10. One appointed by Nehemiah to walk in a procession upon the rebuilt wall of Jerusalem at its inauguration. This may be the same as the priest named at Nehemiah 10. 2. They followed the choir that proceeded past the gate of the sheeps to the right, toward the water gate, eventually meeting the other choir at the temple. NE 12. 31-37 In the days of Joachim, Hananiah was head of the paternal house of Jeremiah. NE 12. 12 If the name Jeremiah here stands for a house and not for an individual, this may be the same as no. 8. Jeremiah, Book of Prophecies and a historical record written by Jeremiah at the direction of Jehovah. Jeremiah was commissioned as prophet in the 13th year of King Josiah 647 BCE to warn the southern kingdom, Judah, of her impending destruction. It was less than a century after the prophet Isaiah's activity and the fall of Israel, the northern kingdom, to the Assyrians. Arrangement. The book is not arranged chronologically, but, rather, according to subject matter. Dating is presented where necessary, but the majority of the prophecies are applicable to the nation of Judah throughout the general period of the reigns of Josiah, Joahaz, Joachim, Joachim, and Zedekiah. God repeatedly told Jeremiah that the nation was incorrigibly wicked, beyond reform. Yet those with right hearts were given full opportunity to reform and find deliverance. As to being prophetic for our day, the arrangement does not affect the understanding and application of Jeremiah's writings. When written, for the most part, the book of Jeremiah was not written at the time he declared the prophecies. Rather, Jeremiah evidently did not put any of his proclamations into writing until he was commanded by Jehovah, in the 4th year of King Joachim 625 BCE to dictate all the words given him by Jehovah to date. This included not only words spoken about Judah in Josiah's time, but also proclamations of judgment on all the nations. J 36. 1, 2 The resulting scroll was burned by Joachim when Judea read it to him. But Jeremiah was ordered to write it over, which he did through his secretary Baruch, with many additional words. 36. 21-23, 28, 32. The remainder of the book was evidently added later, including the introduction, which mentions the 11th year of Zedekiah 1. 3. Other prophecies that Jeremiah wrote down at the time he was to deliver them 30. 2. 51. 60, and the letter to the exiles in Babylon 29. 1. Additionally, the proclamations uttered during the reign of Zedekiah and the accounts of the events after Jerusalem's fall, down to about 580 BCE were added later. It may be that, although the scroll written by Baruch was the basis for a large part of the book, Jeremiah afterward edited and arranged it when adding later sections. Authenticity. The authenticity of Jeremiah is generally accepted. O textoi acute miritra longo, Jeremiah, Book of 33 Principles and Qualities of God. Besides the fulfillments that we have listed, the book sets forth principles that should guide us. It stresses that formalism is of no value in God's eyes, but that he desires worship and obedience from the heart. The inhabitants of Judah are told not to trust in the temple and its surrounding buildings and are admonished. Get yourselves circumcised to Jehovah, and take away the foreskins of your hearts. J 4. 4. 7. 3-7. 9. 25, 26. The book furnishes many illustrations revealing God's qualities and his dealings with his people. Jehovah's great loving kindness and mercy are exemplified in his delivering a remnant of his people and finally restoring them to Jerusalem, as prophesied by Jeremiah. God's appreciation and consideration for those showing kindness to his servants and his being the rewarder of those who seek him and show obedience are highlighted in his care for the Rechabites, for Ebed-Melech, and for Baruch. Jah 35. 18, 19. 39. 16-18. 45. 1-5. Jehovah is brilliantly portrayed as the creator of all things, the king to time indefinite, the only true God. He is the only